My name's Laura, and you're watching Purely Inspired Living. Thanks for joining me today. I decided to show you a few different natal chart generators and show you the difference between whole sign and Placidus. That's something that we discussed in that first video, which I will link in one of these corners. I'll link that above. But astrology can be very, very confusing, and there's a lot to it, and there's a lot of terms and all these things. So today we're just going to dive in again, very basic and very slow, because we do not want to be overwhelmed. All right, so I hope you're ready. Thanks for joining me, and let's go. All right, so in the first screen recording that I have, I'm showing you the housing systems and how they are different. So we are at astro-seek.com on that one, just because that's the one that I like to use. I think it's a little bit user-friendly, more user-friendly than some others. So I like that one. So I'm showing you that one. If you like using another system, or another platform, go for it. I'm just showing you that because it was easy for me to use that interface. There were a few things going on in the video. One, I talk about cusp lines. Now, I've not gone into terminology yet, so a cusp line simply means the beginning of a house. All right, so if you hear that it's on the second house cusp, that means that's the beginning of the second house. Okay, it's just where that house line begins. That's what it means. I will talk about the degrees and the minutes a little bit. So every celestial body and house and all of that have a degree and a minute mark that they are at. That's again where they are in their orbit in the zodiac wheel. It's all measured out in degrees and minutes. So we'll talk about that a little bit. And I do talk about aspects, not specific aspects. I use the term aspects. All an aspect is how a celestial body interacts with one another. So we are not going into aspects, but that is what they are. So when you hear that term, just know we're talking about planets or moons or whatever interacting with another planet or another celestial body of some sort. So without further ado, let's look at the difference between the Placidus house system and a whole sign house system. All right, so I'm pretty sure I'm recording. So here we go. I wanted to show you what it looks like when we use the Placidus house system versus the whole sign house system. So I briefly mentioned it in my Astrology Basics video, and I said we weren't going to really do a whole lot with that, but I did want to come on here and show you the difference. So the Placidus is what I use, and that is what is mostly standard. And there are really subtle differences. I'm using my birth chart because I knew that there were a couple of placements that would change, and let me point those out. So down here in Placidus, which is again what I use, we come down here to my fourth house, which is pretty close to empty. You've got the vertex here, but that's, or sorry, not the vertex, the fortune right here. And that's kind of hit or miss. I actually don't know a whole lot about the fortune, and it's not really used in a lot of astrology. So I really consider my fourth house to be empty. You come over here to whole sign, and the fourth house is literally empty. You can see that right here, the I almost did it again. The fortune and the north node are in Pisces, and they're here. See, Pisces is right here. They're in Pisces, but they're technically in two separate houses. You come over here to whole sign, and because the house takes up the whole sign, they are now both squarely in the fifth house. So my Mars is still in 6th house. Most of my planets are the same. They're in the same houses. But over here, here's another big one. My sun is at 0 degrees Virgo. So I'm a 0 degrees Virgo baby. And my sun in Placidus is in the 10th house. 10th house represents kind of your career and kind of the mark you leave on the world. So it's kind of important when your sun is in the 10th house. When you come over here to whole sign, you can see that my 10th house, which is all this right here, is now empty. The sun is right on that line because it's a 0 degrees. And this next house, the 11th house, starts right here where Virgo begins and Leo ends, okay? So that's really the difference. There's not a whole lot, and some of you might not have very much of a difference at all in your planetary placements in your houses, but this is the biggest difference that I know of. So, I mean, you can still see my Libra 12th house empty in both places, my 7th house Taurus empty in both places. So that part didn't change. There's just some that's on this cusp line where it really does make a difference. And right here, so my sun is, I mean, it's toward the tail end of my 10th house, but it's still like solidly in the 10th house. Whereas over here, you see that it is on the line, but it is for sure in the 11th house. The 11th house is about community. So depending on how you read this, which system you go with changes how you read some of these planets. We'll get more into how to determine what the house does to the planet or celestial that's in there. We'll get to that later. I just wanted to show you the difference between what they look like. You'll notice that, come over here, all of these are still the same, right? My sun is still 0 degrees of Virgo, 0 degrees of Virgo, but the housing is different. My moon, 8 degrees of Capricorn, 8 degrees of Capricorn. Like all the planets are the exact same placement, but in whole sign, it makes this house take up the entire sign. All right, that is the difference. Whereas the Placidus over here, we see, it's hard to tell on my first house, but my first house starts at 1 degree of Scorpio, so it's not the entire sign of Scorpio. And we can really see it down here where my IC is, where my 4th house cusp begins. It is after Aquarius has already begun, and my 5th house starts a quarter of the way through Pisces. So that is the difference. It moves these cusp lines to begin and end where those where the zodiacs are. Okay, that's the difference. I don't know a whole lot about whole sign. Like I said, I just use Placidus. Referring back to my video, I didn't know any better, so I just went with whatever the suggested setting was, and it's almost always going to be Placidus. That is the common standard setting for your zodiac sign. But this can be confusing. When we go further down, this astrology rabbit hole, you'll understand why. But just by looking at it, I mean, it gets confusing where your houses begin and end, especially if you're on a cusp between 2 zodiac signs, like right here. For a long time, it really confused me about what planets were in what house because it was hard to read, because it looks like, based off of where this Uranus is sitting, it almost looks like it might be in the 3rd house, but it's actually this little green line right here, which is in the 2nd house. It gets a little confusing. Actually, over here, it's a little that part doesn't really change. It still looks confusing because it's close to that cusp line. But it gets, I mean, you can really tell right here where, you know, I didn't know where my fortune was when I was first starting to look at these, because I couldn't tell if it was literally on the line, so then it would fall in the 5th house, or if it was just shy of the line, so it fell in the 4th house. Whereas over here, whole sign, you very clearly see that it fits in that whole sign of Pisces, which then falls in the 5th house over here. So it can actually simplify things a little bit to use whole sign, but I've always used Placidus and I'm comfortable with how it works, so I'm going to continue to use Placidus. I do want to come up here and show you. So edit birth data and settings, you come down here, extended settings. So here in AstroSeek, if you want to change what house sign you're in, your house system, you click this sign right here. So right here's Placidus. This will be automatically clicked. It's standard. But they have all of these, like all of those. I don't know what they all are. Here's a no houses. We'll show you what that looks like real quick. Redraw. So here, all of the houses are gone. And then it also changes, so since the housing system is gone, it also changes what your first house is. Over here, it's your standard. It goes back to your standard zodiac wheel being starting in Aries. So that is no house, but you can play around and see what kind of feels the best, what seems the least overwhelming to you, and go with that. If you're not ready to go into houses, look at the no house. I would still suggest doing a house system. So here's whole sign. We'll go back to that. I would still suggest using a house system just so you can start getting comfortable with where your natal chart begins, which mine starts at 1 degree of Scorpio. That's where my ascendant line is. Now that is true regardless. Over here, Placidus, the first house starts at your ascending line, whereas in whole sign it will go to the edge of that first zodiac. So I hope that made a little bit of sense. Go in and play around with some of these settings. Like I said, go with what looks the least overwhelming, what feels the least overwhelming, and start there. If you don't want to do the housing lines at all because they're just like, that's just a lot of extra, hey, you do what works for you. And if that's what works for you at the stage that you're at, you go ahead and do that. I mean, you deserve the least amount of confusion as possible when you're first starting down astrology, because it can be very overwhelming. This can look very overwhelming. Next, I want to show you what the same chart looks like in a couple of different astrology places. So we'll get into that next. Before we jump into the next screen recording, I just want to preface what's going on. So I am using Astro-Seek and I'm using astrograph.com. So we're comparing what the Placidus housing system, what that natal chart, technically my natal chart, looks like in each of these platforms. So we're using the same housing system. Everything should be the same. I'm just showing you the difference between what Astro-Seek looks like and astrograph.com and how they can be different, and that difference might mean the difference in you understanding and you not. So just providing that information so you can visually see how different programs present that information. So let's get to it.
So here we are using, again, this one right here is going to be your AstroSeek, which is what I've been using. That's my typical go-to, is AstroSeek. I like how this looks. This doesn't feel too overwhelming for me, and it gives me all the information that I need. Over here is Astrograph. They also make an app called Time Passages. I did have to make an account here, but it is free. So there's my birth information. So here is the same system. This is the same house system. So over here it says Placidus house system. This one doesn't say, I mean, it would say that down here in settings. But I mean, we can see here that based on the coloring, that the cusp lines are not at the edge of each color. So like I said, I prefer AstroSeek with the way it looks. I like that each zodiac sign is sectioned off. At first, that bit was a little confusing to me, but now I really like that part. So I like that it has that. Over here, it doesn't necessarily have that, but it does have a color code. So if this outside wheel is a bit too much with all these little tick marks, if that's too much, then this over here might be more your jam, where we've got our color coding to show us where. So here's my Scorpio. It shows us the Scorpio actually starts here. The cusp line is right down here, just below where it starts, and here's your blue. I do want to show if I can zoom in here. Oh, and I can. So this was really interesting. This part is a little nicer over here because, as you can see, this second house cusp line is so close to this line right here. So for the longest time, I thought that the whole second house was Sagittarius, that it started right here where this zodiac started. But as you can see right here, because of this coloring, it actually ends at the very, very end of Scorpio. So this right here tells you where this cusp line is. And I'm going to tell you right now, there are 30 degrees in a zodiac. Okay, so we are at 29. There are 60 minutes. This would be the little minute mark. So this is the degree, and this is called the minute mark. There are 30 degrees, so it doesn't go above 29. All right, 29 is the last degree you can be at, and 59 is the last minute you can be at before you switch to another zodiac sign. As you can see, I'm 7 minutes away from it being into a whole new zodiac. From it starting, it's the difference between starting in Scorpio and Sagittarius. And you can kind of see that better here. I do also like that it tells you out here where your cusps are, like where they actually start at. But the rest of it is a little overwhelming to me. So all of these like crissy-crossy lines in here, these are all your aspects. They're called aspects. But they're basically the interactions, like what different planetary celestial interactions are happening between this one over here and that one over there and this one here. And over here you have some of those, but they're just so much less. When you get further down into astrology and you're actually reading the aspects, this part can be nice. They are color-coded as well to show you where these interactions are beginning and where they're going and who they're interacting with. And that's an important part of astrology. Me personally, I don't read the aspects as much, and so just the big ones is more than enough for me. So this is a bit overwhelming. Yeah, this one's a bit overwhelming. But that's my opinion. I just wanted to show you, again, this up here is astrograph.com. You set up an account for free, and then you do your information just like normal. And then now mine is saved on here. So I just clicked on my name and my birth chart, and this came up. So I just wanted to show you the difference here. We can come see right here, it says your house, your Placidus house system. It lists all the things that are, you've got your asteroids here, and it tells you what all's showing up, and then includes major and minor aspects. Again, those aspects are these little lines up here. So that's why there are so many. It includes major and minor, and showing all those lines, and that's just, for me, that's a bit much. But again, you might really like that the housing, or the zodiac system is color coded. And you'll notice our colors are blue, red, green, and yellow, and that represents your elements. So that's another nice aspect of using Astrograph, because we can see that Scorpio is a water element. It's associated with water. We can see that Sagittarius down here is associated with fire. I mean, you have that over here. So Leo is associated with fire, so it's red. Virgo is black. It's associated with earth. I think since the whole zodiac is color coded, that it helps you see it a little bit better than just, and over here, see, I would not associate air with green. That's very much an earth color, and yellow is very much an air color. So I think the coloring, if you're into colors and color coding, that could be helpful for you over here on Astrograph. But really, it's up to your preference. There are other systems. There are other zodiac birth chart generators that you can use. I have found personally these two are these have been the easiest for me to use, especially AstroSeek. As you are familiar with, I am more comfortable over here with AstroSeek. But like I said, there are parts of this one that I also really like. So again, it's up to you, but I wanted to show you a couple different places where you can go in and look at your birth chart in a couple of different ways to help you find what your best fit is. Again, just like with the housing system, whichever one you look at and you're more drawn to, then use that one. And if neither one of these work, let me know, and I will list a couple of other places where you can find a different birth chart generator, because really it's all up to your preferences and what helps you understand this. If you look at this and you're instantly on guard, or you're instantly uncomfortable, it's not going to be a good learning experience for you. So I just wanted to throw all of that out there so you can actually see what's going on here and decide for yourself where you would like to find your natal chart at, which system you'd like to use, and which ones you're most comfortable with.
Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I just thought that it would be really important for us to show those differences, just real quick. I know that there are things that come up, and I just want to provide that little bit of extra information, because there are so many terms, and you start doing research and you hear whole sign Placidus, and you hear, all of these different platforms that will generate your natal chart. And I just wanted to show you a few of them, and how trying out different ones is actually a really good thing, because you might actually find that one fits your visual aesthetic better than another, and that visual stimulus being something that you connect with will help you learn your chart easier. If you are struggling to see everything and it's just visually overwhelming, again, like I said, you're not going to be able to learn as well as if it's something that is visually comforting to you. So try them out, figure out what works, what doesn't work for you, and find one that just really fits with your learning style and your visual aesthetic, because that's going to be the difference between feeling comfortable in learning your natal chart and just being completely overwhelmed by it. I hope you found this really helpful. If you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. So I know that, this community is really getting some good information from this kind of stuff, and I'll dive into more basic astrology as we go on. If you know someone that's studying astrology and they're just getting started, go ahead and share this video with them. Maybe they've not tried these platforms, or maybe they're unfamiliar with some of these terms, and that can really just help them, give them a leg up on their astrology studies. And leave comments, which platform do you use? How do you like to read your natal chart, or how do you like to visually see your chart? I'm so curious of how other people, which ones they prefer. I mean, it's not good or bad, it's just different, and I love learning from you guys too. So share with me what you like best, what you don't like, and all of it. Again, thank you so much for joining me today, and until next time, I hope you stay inspired.